California. Hedieh worked within our government under 5 different presidents, served our nation, but as a Muslim. And she was a Muslim that sought to bring reform to Islam until such time as she became a Christian. And now she works to expose Islam. Hedieh Jan, how are you today? And by the way, just for the audience again, those of you who are not used to it, both of us being from Iran, we're Persian. We say John, Jan, because that means dear, like we're sort of as a term of endearment. So if you hear this, I'm not calling her John as a name. This is a term of endearment. But Hedieh Jan, how are you today? Thank you for joining me tonight on the program.
I am absolutely fantastic, Shamjan. Thank you for having me.
Now, your ministry, Resurrect Ministry, is it .com?
Yes.
ResurrectMinistry.com. You now are committed to bringing the gospel forth, to giving
Amen.
people the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the only name that can save. But you were a Muslim before, and you worked in the government. Just quickly again, bring the audience who knows you very well, but just quickly bring anybody that maybe hasn't seen you before up to speed on your background. And then let's talk about your latest article that you just wrote in the Christian Post that we'll bring up in a minute.
Sure. So I got involved in Islam. I actually was not raised Muslim by my parents. They were secular Persians, came before the revolution. I got involved in Islam, and the particular sect that I ended up in was in this ideological battle here in the United States and around the world for what they described as like the heart and soul of Islam. And so I was fascinated by this fight, and it revolved around the definition of jihad and military jihad and the ability to wage military or combatant jihad, because we know from our dear friend Annie that there are 12 different kinds of jihad, but we're talking specifically about the combatant one. And so I got involved with the U.S. government trying to help identify moderate Muslim networks and kind of separate these two groups from each other and understand what was radicalizing young people and societies around the world to gravitate, especially in Western societies, to gravitate towards this militant jihad grouping, the Salafi Wahhabi grouping, the Brotherhood grouping, and how it was active in the United States. And so obviously I wasn't very successful. But over time, I just got fed up and realized that it was an impossible task, both inside and outside the U.S. government, and that Islam was not the answer. And moderate Islam, the reformed Islam, of which my teacher was one of the leading scholars. I mean, he was on ISIS's 2015 hit list as an infidel, as a kafir. But I realized that there was no solution within Islam and that it couldn't be reformed. And I'm grateful that the Lord found me, saved me, and redeemed me for his glory.
Amen to that. Amen to that. Yeah. By the way, who was your scholar? Can you mention his name? Or
yeah, sure. It was Sheikh Kabbani.
Sheikh Kabbani. Okay, I'm familiar with him.
So him and Hamza Yusuf were the primary targets of ISIS's 2015 hit list.
And which is interesting because I tell people that all the time. I'm like, even the reformers, usually they're the first ones, unfortunately, to go when when the fundamentalists have their way, because they're going to deny that there is a legitimate reform. They're going to deny, because of course you have the biggest issue within Islam, which is the concept of abrogation. You have this so-called revelation of latter verses that are better than the early verses.
Well, and interesting, if you want to talk just a minute about abrogation. So my teacher was saying the militant verses were abrogated. So he had flipped the script on abrogation and said, because there was no longer a caliphate, the commandments for military jihad were invalid. And I think that's what really put him on their radar. So I was writing dozens of reports about how these tribal leaders in Southeast Asia and Africa were being massacred by the Brotherhood Salafi groups because they wanted to change their mystical kind of the merging they did of Hinduism and other kinds of Buddhism wherever they encountered these Asian cultures. They had come up with a more moderate interpretation of Islam. And so these jihadi groups were just trying to decimate them. They would hang their bodies from trees, leave them out for 3 days, just to send a message to the community that version of Islam was no longer acceptable.
And ultimately, we see that same battle in the United States, right? As we talk about your latest article, and guys, if we can bring just that screenshot of Hediye's article in the Christian Post, there it is right there. This is your latest article in the Christian Post that is titled "The Red Jihad: How Far Left and Jihadist Extremism Are Merging." So the same battle is waging here because there are we've been told for many years that there is this more moderate version somewhere in Islam. And yet what we see happening is that the militant or the fundamentalist Muslims, particularly obviously led by the Muslim Brotherhood, are winning the day. They're the ones who are now gaining power. They're the ones who are controlling the Muslim communities. They're the ones who are controlling these enclaves. So even if there legitimately are Muslims like you used to be, your voices like yours in those communities are then either overrun or attacked, or we see this, as you said, in other parts of the world where they're literally killed because we've seen, in fact, recently, this is exactly what happened in Syria. When Jolani came in under the Sunni banner, they went after the Alawites because this, sect of Islam or Muslims rejects political Islam. We don't believe in a taking over. We don't believe that Islam should become the government, which, by the way, ironically, is exactly what Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi is right now fighting for Iran, where they want to go back to a secular governance where, yes, there's going to be Muslims there that are living in Iran, not many, but
which existed throughout the Muslim world, because let's go back in history to the end of the Ottoman Empire, World War I. The demand of the Western countries, though everyone wants to describe it as colonialism, what the demand was to destroy Sharia dominance and their attempt to conquer other lands. And so they were dividing them into nation states, and Sharia was not a source of law for the constitution of those countries. That's why we saw the rise of secularism in Jordan, in Syria, in Turkey, in Iran. And we saw those societies open up because Islam was relegated back to the personal sphere. It was a personal faith, and it was kept out of government. But I often told government officials in the United States and in Europe, I said, you are going to radicalize the middle if you keep empowering these Islamists, because they have such a stronghold as they grow in wealth and power and influence that they will quash the moderates or the reformers. And that's what we see happening.
That's exactly what we see happening. And so really, it's irrelevant because I'm sure you get this question. I get this question, what percentage of Muslims are moderate in their views or want secular governance? But really, the answer is irrelevant. Because as long as the fundamentalists, who has power, exactly. And now the power on the Islamic side is being buttressed up by the red. So the green, going to your article, is being buttressed by the red. And what you mentioned earlier about our friend Annie's book about the architecture of jihad and 12 different types of jihad. But when we talk about just the foundational definition of jihad as warfare against non-Muslims to establish the religion, according to the Reliance of the Traveler, this is the textbook definition of the word jihad, from the word mujahada, signifying warfare. That, hey, whatever we got to do to establish Islam over non-Muslims is part of that warfare. Now, again, Annie does a great job of breaking it down.
Yes.
But tell me about your article. What are you seeing? And of course, we saw this just last night with the election of Abdullah Syed, which we'll get to after the break here in just about 3 or 4 minutes. But in the 3 or 4 minutes we have before in this segment, tell us a little bit about what are you seeing in your article? What do you mean by red jihad?
So this article is specifically focused on the rise of domestic terrorism. So I focused on Secretary Rubio's ministerial conference, where they basically announced the Trump doctrine on what's the biggest threat in domestic terrorism. and they describe it as political terrorism. And he focused on the far left, very similar to what was happening in the 70s, but added the fact that they were aligned with these jihadist groups. And it doesn't, and the way Scott Besson said it is, they don't have to agree about what comes next. They agree that destruction must come first. So they've agreed on the immediate enemy. And so what I'm trying to explain to people in this is that, so when I look at radicalization patterns all the way starting from the 90s to the 2015 surge of ISIS, is we saw radicalization took 2 years or more under Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. He wanted disciplined, devout soldiers in his army. When we get to ISIS, that radicalization curve goes down to 6 weeks.
Wow.
Now, yeah, it was dramatically different. These kids were literally, teenagers smoking pot in their mom's basement and then going over to blow themselves up in Syria in less than 6 weeks. And so that was frightening. There was over 250 plus that we lost to the jihad, including females that were going over to become ISIS brides. But fast forward to the red jihad, the Islamists have discovered we don't even need to convert them. Why bother? That is another layer of difficulty. And so when we look at groups like the Order of the Nine Angles, the Maniac Murder Cult, the true crime community, they're being described as these kind of nihilistic, sadistic groups. But in fact, what they've done is they've merged, Hitler doctrine with ISIS doctrine. They're idealizing these figures that commit mass murder. And their goal is to destroy Western civilization. They don't care what comes after. They say only destruction must come first, and that they're going to utilize violence and disruption, societal disruption, to get us to that end state.
And so this is why they are now so buddy-buddy with the avowed Marxists and communists. And again, when I was on yesterday, folks, when I was on with Brannon on his radio program, we talked about that the Democrat Socialists of America aren't socialist. By their own admission, they're communist. By their own admission, Hassan Piker, who I think in a little bit after the break, I have a clip of, again, Abdul Sayed, and he just did a rally with Hassan Piker, who is a DSAer who loves to wear these Maoist suits and, brag about their Maoism and their communism. So that's what you're saying, is that they're finding common ground because they both want the destruction of our constitutional republic, of Western society, individual rights, Judeo-Christian foundation, individual property right.
Capitalism, yeah, individual property rights.
Exactly.
Yep.
Actually, borders, boundaries, police, prisons, so forth and so on. And a separation of government, because they hate the idea that we actually have separate branches of government that are there to hold each other accountable. Right. So they share that, but they're also, according to what you're saying in this article, are now sharing the violence. Yes. They're sharing now the fact that is justified. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Exactly. And so what I'm advocating for, so from a domestic terrorism standpoint, the US, the models that we currently have in place are prevention models that assumed these were happening in these ideological boxes. We had, the white supremacist groups like the KKK, we have the Muslim groups, and then we have the radical left groups, and they were applying different resources and modalities and prevention techniques to these specific communities. And the radicalization pathways were defined based on decades of research ever since 9/11. But now those boxes don't fit. And so the prevention techniques don't fit. And in fact, some of the 764 folks and the O9A that have been captured overseas in Europe, they actually have gone through the prevention DRAD programs in Europe and failed. Because those prevention modalities do not apply. They're not disenfranchised Muslims that are fighting the system. They're actually united by this sense of nihilism, of wanting destruction, and it just doesn't have the same, the prevention modalities don't have an impact on them. And so
that's incredible. We got to go to a break, but if I'm trying to paraphrase or just wrap up what you're saying before we go to break, so we're not ready for this. We are not equipped for this as a government. They haven't war gamed this out, and
well, it's not public yet. I don't know what's happening in the government, but based on what's been announced publicly, it looks like they're ramping up for it, because that's why Secretary Rubio and Stephen Miller and Bessent had this giant conference, which is like, this is where we're going to focus. But all of our systems underneath are kind of still, if you see the public facing aspect of it, they're still built for, 9/11, post 9/11.
Right. Not the fact that they're going to actually have political power and have these people that are now in office members of. See, this is the problem is, again, we're too late to the game, aren't we? They haven't heeded the voices. They haven't heeded the warnings of what has been going on. And now we're dealing from a huge deficit because they're already in power and they're gaining more power as we speak. So, folks, stay tuned. We have much more to talk about with Hediye. Again, we got Robert Spencer coming up as well, but we're going to talk more about this Red-Green Alliance, this propensity to violence, and how we're now seeing it take actual power in our nation. That and much more right after the break.
At a certain age, you stop chasing younger. You start protecting what helps you feel steady, strong, and well. Your body's collagen matters. It supports the structure of your skin, joints, and connective tissue. But as the years go by, your body needs more support from the inside. That's where Bella Grace Elixir comes in. Bella Grace Elixir combines Verisol collagen, the world's most clinically proven collagen, with Asteryl astaxanthin and cat's claw in a proprietary blend designed to help support the processes that reconstruct collagen, while also offering antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects. And this isn't just for women. It's for men and women who want to age with more confidence, more care, and a daily wellness routine that supports the body from within. One simple elixir, thoughtfully formulated for whole body wellness. Take care of the body that has carried you this far. Order Bella Grace Elixir today at melissahousebg.com.
Well, welcome back from the break. Again, Brannon House Live tonight. Shahram Hadian, Pastor Shahram Hadian with Truth and Love Ministry filling in for Brannon tonight. And also, I'll be here tomorrow night as well, as Brannon gets a chance to be able to celebrate his wife's birthday. Happy birthday, by the way, to Melissa. And I have my good friend, Hediye Miramati on with resurrectministry.com. And before the break, we were talking about what we see with this merger, again, of the red and the green, of the left and this Islamic movement that ultimately, and Hediye, if I can ask you this question, you've probably seen some of these clips now of some even left individuals like Bill Maher. I played a clip of him on my show yesterday. Well, a part of a clip because there was too many swear words in it. But even these guys are now warning about the takeover of the Democrat Party by these radical leftists that are full-blown Marxist communists. They're not just even, they're not socialist light like Obama. They are full-blown revolutionaries, bring the, quote, empire down, and violence is justified. I want to play a clip. We're going to show an example of this violence of something that's happened in Dearborn, a city that is now fully taken over by the Islamic movement, a city that has been captured. I believe Dearborn Heights, and then Hamtramck, these are suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, have now been captured. And we're going to talk, obviously, again, folks, about the elections that we just saw last night. We have some others coming up very soon, by the way, that we're going to keep eyes on next week, because we have some primary elections coming up, for example, in Wisconsin and other parts of the country where we have some of these DSAers running. But last night's big one was in Michigan with Abdel El-Sayed. But before I go to this clip of this incident, a full-on assault that happened in Dearborn, what is your view on what we see happening with, like, do you think some of these, I don't want to say moderate Democrats, but some of these leftists, but they're leftists that don't necessarily like vehemently hate America, right? They're leftists that actually like being in America. They actually like the concept of capitalism. They want to, make money, do well. They don't like the idea of their property being seized, like we just saw in Spain with the mob that came over from Morocco. Do you think that this could be a wake-up call? Even in Michigan after the election last night, they're saying, I'm sorry, not in Michigan, in Wisconsin, I just read an article that they're saying, well, the more these radicals win, the better it is for Republicans. What's your thought on the left's wake-up? And then is this actually good for Republicans, or is the Republican Party too asleep to really understand what's going on?
So a couple of things. I think the problem with the, this being good because it's good for the Republicans is that, unfortunately, what a lot of the commentators are pointing out is that the average American doesn't know what they stand for. So, the DSA has 120,000 members and growing. And in Abdullah al-Sayed's election, 5.2 million Americans didn't vote. So people are either checking out or they hear, free buses and healthcare. They don't actually do the research to learn what these candidates actually represent. Do you know they want to close your prisons? Do you know they want to abolish ICE and get rid of borders? They don't know what they're actually voting for. And it's a lack of education. And the problem is, if they gain momentum and, we allow it, we don't do anything to stop the momentum, it may be too late before the momentum stops.
Right.
And so I prefer we didn't allow it.
Absolutely. And again, this is why I think even some of these leftists like Bill Maher are now sounding the alarm. Right. Like, I've watched actually several, and again, I don't watch him, and he's an atheist. He's mocked Christians, but I've watched like 3 or 4 of his recent monologues. He is literally like kind of a watchman on the left. He is literally sounding the alarm. Like, yes, you guys don't get it. Like, and he even said, my vote is in play for Republicans. He said that
James Carville said the same thing. If they represent the party, I'm out.
I'm out. Exactly. So this is a fundamental shift in our nation. But like you said, number one, with low voter turnout, especially in primaries, right, and then we're seeing them take over. But let's get back to the violence aspect with your article, because what you're saying is that the red is now justifying jihad. The red is now buying into the jihad mantra. And of course, they find commonality with Muslims. Let's watch. So over last week, I think it was actually over the weekend, there was one of the largest, if not the largest, Ashura procession. These are predominantly the Shiite Muslims that are in Michigan. Some of the Arabs there are Shiite. One of the largest mosques that is in Dearborn, yes, is headed by Elahi, this imam that is deeply connected to the Iranian regime. Folks, I told you before that this is the guy that worked to shut our event down. I was supposed to speak in Dearborn 2019, I think it was, with Jim Simpson, the author of Red Green Access. And Elahi worked with the interfaithers and the media and Congresswoman Dingell to put so much fear upon the church and so many threats that they canceled our event with 36 hours to go. I literally was on the way to the airport and got the call from the pastor that his Baptist elders, this is a Baptist church, his Baptist elders overran him and canceled the event last minute. This canceled policy, but Dearborn is obviously one of the absolute hubs of the what I would say is this red jihad now. Certainly the green jihad, but the red jihad. We're routinely seeing death to America. We've seen Christians and Jews being told by the city council, you're not welcome here. Right. And yeah, go ahead.
If I can point out, so because I talk about in this article, it's focused on the terrorism aspect, but in terms of domestic security, we talk about radicalization pathways upstream. So we want to prevent left of boom is the way it's described. So before the violent act occurs. And so in the Red Jihad, what's happening is that the local law enforcement and the city councils are not enforcing laws at the local level, and it encourages this violence. And that's what we see with what happened to Nick Lang, is that when the law enforcement is not being proactive about enforcing laws at the basic level, it emboldens them to think violence is a legitimate and effective solution. And we see that happening at the city council to build these like super Islamic complexes. Right. Is that the city councils or the planning commissions are either rubber stamping these, or they're not paying attention and they're giving these permits to these massive compounds that don't follow local laws. And so what happens is that they get emboldened and the rest of the community members get upset, and it creates this discord and fracture in our communities that we could have stopped, or we could have intervened earlier to decrease the escalation in social tensions. But there's a number of factors on why that's happening. But in the terrorism space, especially, it's important because law enforcement has to be clued in that, we're going to use and I think you used to be in law enforcement, right?
Yes.
So do you know the broken windows theory?
I'm not familiar with that.
So the broken windows theory is that if we enforce the small crimes, we will prevent the bigger crimes. And it became a policy, I think it was in the late 90s, because they were realizing with gang violence that we were not enforcing the laws against the lower crimes, and it emboldened the gangs. And so it's the same thing here, that these anarchist groups, these, Red-Green Alliance activist organizations will continue to be emboldened to silence Christians, to attack them, to deplatform them, if we don't enforce the trespassing laws, the disturbing the peace laws, disorderly conduct, malicious mischief. These are all laws that could be enforced at the local level to decrease the violent or potentially violent interaction before it happens, so we don't get to the point where someone goes and stabs somebody on the street, which we're seeing happening almost every month now. Is we're having some form of targeted violence that occurs from these groups that have now escalated. And actually, I think Tyler Robinson is one of the most extreme examples, because he was part of the Armed Queers. That's run by an Iranian trans man. So it's technically a man who claims he's a woman, trained in Cuba in military arms, and supports the IRGC and the revolutionary government in Iran against America. So you could see how that escalation of violence, that where he feels emboldened to assassinate Charlie Kirk, because he traveled in this ecosystem that encouraged violence against the state. And that what the state represented, what American values represented, was inherently evil and corrupt and needed to be destroyed, of which Charlie Kirk was the epitome of, of President Trump and of Christian values. And he was assassinated for what he represented to Americans.
Well, I mean, I completely agree with you. That was a great analysis of the sort of the genesis of how we're seeing this normalization of violence, as you said, that this has now become normalized, not just in the red and in the green, but you also mentioned in the trans, because I mean, I keep telling people that there's also this sort of trans Tifa, Antifa trans element now, like with the likes of Tyler Robinson that you mentioned, that is joining in this coalition. And again, we're seeing violence normalized. Speaking of that violence, this is the clip that I wanted to play. So again, going back to Dearborn, this guy, Jake Lang, he's an outspoken activist. He's been all across the country. He had done some stuff against the anti-ICE people, but he's also stood up against Islam. Now, again, folks, not exactly the way I would do it, where he goes out there with a Quran and with bacon, and he's trying to sort of incite Muslims. Doesn't usually go very well. But nevertheless, in this clip, he was in the streets of Dearborn with a sign that said Jesus Christ is king. He was shouting that, no, Jesus is Lord over Dearborn, not Islam or Allah. And let's go to the first clip, guys, and watch what happens as the Muslim mob attacks him. This was part of that, again, Ashura festival with about 45,000 Muslims in the streets of Dearborn. Let's watch this clip. Now, you saw that. Can we go back real quick and can you play that second part? Because I wanted to get Hadia's comment. Now, again, folks, former police officer here. Watch as he's running.
And that's media, a police cruiser, right?
That's a police cruiser right there. Yeah. So as you watch there, Hedi, can you see there's only one police officer? The media was saying that there was multiple police officers that escorted him out. Nobody escorted him out. He ran to the police car for dear life. And then while he's trying to get into the police car, this female police officer, which, you can't blame her. What is she going to do, right? What is she going to do against this mob of Muslim men? You also notice that there was a security guard that was part of that protest or the Ashura thing. He goes up and punches him in the head. So that's at least a misdemeanor assault. But the beginning of the video, the guy with the checkered shirt that had come up to him, can you actually go back and play the first part real quick, if you don't mind? Right here, watch this. This guy that comes up to him and hits him, can you guys tell he's got a rock in his hand? So if you guys see he's got a rock in his hand. And so from what Jake Lang had posted after that, he was cut in the head, he was bleeding. So that right there was a felony assault because now you're using a deadly weapon, in this case, a rock in your hand. Now, and you can go ahead and come back to us. Look, obviously, Hedi, he was saying that, he was almost stoned to death. I mean, that's a little exaggerated. But the fact that is a major assault. The camera guy was assaulted. I counted at least 15 to 20 punches, and then kicks, even while he was getting in the police cruiser.
Correct.
Yet there was no response that we see. We just saw before we went on air tonight that they're claiming there's now one arrest. But give me your take on watching that, and then let's talk about. You said it in your comment previously. This is all happening locally. This is the Dearborn Police Department that, according to their Muslim chief Shaheen, bragging about 50% of their department being Muslim now, where he said that, this was, mashallah, 50% of our department is Muslim, praising Allah as a police chief of a city. What are your thoughts watching this video? And does this back up what you're saying with your article?
Yeah, absolutely. Because the problem is that the First Amendment protects not only pleasant speech, but uncomfortable speech. It's supposed to protect people. The only parameter of it is you cannot incite violence. And all he is saying is an imminent threat of violence. And all he's saying is Jesus is Lord. He should, even if that makes the Muslims uncomfortable. And let's talk about, why does that make you uncomfortable? Why, when there's 50,000 of you, are you so upset at him just saying Jesus is Lord? It's the intolerance and the brutality of these folks that is just disgusting. And then on the other side, why did he have to run to the police cruiser? Why weren't the police already on scene? Maybe they didn't know that there was this disruption, but why didn't they do more to help him to protect his speech? And if we look at England, what happens is that the person that wants his right to free speech is the one that gets arrested. So
Right.
we're one step away from him not being able to say what he wants to say on the streets of America because they say that is inciting violence. A simple statement about Jesus as Lord is later going to be characterized as what's inciting violence. I mean, I think that's, if we look at Europe, that will be the direction we go. If we do not talk about training our police departments to intervene in these smaller crimes to prevent an escalation that teaches people that violence is actually effective. Look at Luigi Mangione. He's being glorified by people because he took matters into his own hand and killed a man in broad daylight. We can't get to the point as a society where that's acceptable.
Well, and you mentioned earlier about Tyler Robinson, and we saw all the
Exactly.
people that were celebrating the public assassination, probably the most public assassination in modern history, because it was caught on, camera and broadcast around the world. I'm talking about Charlie Kirk. And yet there was, numerous videos that we all saw, disgusting videos of people rejoicing, celebrating. And going back to this incident in Dearborn, again, this is not, let's be clear, this is not the first time something like this happened in Dearborn. This has happened multiple times where Christians, and again, I don't agree with Jake Lang's tactics. I want to be very clear about that. It is not the way that I would want to approach Muslims to try to...
Wait, but
Yeah.
let's be clear. His tactics in the past are pretty obnoxious, but this one I have no problem with.
That's true. That's a great point.
And I think he may have modified his practices just to be like, listen, I'm going to show you that it doesn't matter how peaceful you are, and I think that was quite a demonstration of that.
That's a great point, and you're absolutely right. You're right. In this case, we can't fault him for other than standing on the sidewalk, public space, where he has the First Amendment right, and voicing that no, I don't want Dearborn to be for Islam. I want Dearborn to be for Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ is Lord over Dearborn. And we saw. Let's be clear. Also, you would agree that was a mob. That was a mob, like 30, 40. Huge, young, strong, violent, aggressive men, including, as I said, the security guard that was part of the Ashura procession.
Islam is a religion of peace, right?
Yeah, Islam is a religion of peace, and yet that video should have been front page news of every newspaper, every show should have been covering that a Christian, whether you agree with him or not, is beaten up, a hit with a rock that could have killed him because of where it hit on the side of the head. Certainly it caused bodily damage. And you saw a pitiful police officer standing there doing nothing, basically saying, leave him alone. And he's got to run to the police cruiser and jump in and hide for dear life. So these are, to our point, going to be increasing incidents of what you're talking about is now this red jihad, where it's not only then what we've seen as typical terrorism or typical jihad, but it is now morphed into the local level. It's now happening where if you stand up for your rights as a Christian in America, in an American city, this is the type of violence, or someone's going to pick you off with a rifle, like in the situation of Charlie Kirk. So listen, we got to go to a break. When we come back from the break, I'm going to ask Hedieh about the election, the primary victory of one Abdul El-Sayed in Michigan. What are we looking at with regards to the Islamic red-green political movement? Stay tuned for more right after the break.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
You are watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries, research, high-profile interviews, and the radio and television broadcasts of Brannon House.
Well, welcome back to Brannon House Live. Again, Pastor Shahram Hadian filling in for Brannon. Great to have you guys back with us. We're talking to Hedi Miramati, and we're talking about this Red-Green Alliance, folks, that is rapidly gaining ground. If you missed my introduction, I talked about that this is exactly what happened in Iran. We saw the same players take over Iran. This is exactly what's happening right now in Western European nations, in Canada. I just got a text from one of our supporters up in Canada where they were talking about the fact that, just how rapidly they see Canada deteriorating into a Marxist stronghold, but yet also these countries like Western Europe, they shield Islam. They always shield Islam. And part of my concern for what is happening in places like Dearborn, Michigan, or Patterson, New Jersey, or Hamtramck, Michigan, or in Minneapolis and so forth, one of the concerns is that, and I've warned about this, is that the Red-Green Alliance, particularly on the green side, is taking over our police department. So if they're controlling mayor's offices, if they're controlling city councils, if they're controlling local judgeships, and if they're controlling the police departments, who is going to do the enforcing? Who is going to then be there to actually stand for the justice and the rights of those who are now the minority in these areas? Let's bring Hedi back. Hedi, we saw with the election of Abdul El-Sayed. So the primary August 4th this week. Next week, we have some other ones we're going to keep an eye on. Have you tracked this guy? Remember when he ran for governor in Michigan? I was on again with Brannon, and we talked about his connections, deep connections to the Muslim Brotherhood. Right. He's run as now a Democrat socialist candidate. What was your thought leading up to this? And then we're going to play a clip of his victory speech in the primary as he defeated an incumbent. And this is becoming the pattern, isn't it? Yep. They're able to defeat incumbent, longtime Democrats in some of these races. And according to his own admission, they were outspent like 10-1. So your thoughts on Abdul El-Sayed? Now he is the Democratic candidate for Senate in the state of Michigan, going up against, I believe it is, I got to look this up. I think it was, as you talk, I'm going to figure out his Republican candidate in the primary.
Mike Rogers, I think. I'm not mistaken.
It's Mike Rogers. Yes, yeah. You're correct. Mike Rogers. Thank you for that. So here is the headline. Yeah, actually, can you come back for that real quick, guys? I missed that. So look at this, about 150,000 votes. No, I'm sorry, 1.5 million votes.
How many he won by less than 15,000.
And you won by less than 15,000 in the primary. But didn't you say that a huge amount of voters sat out? You were saying that earlier?
Yeah, I heard something like 5 million voters didn't vote.
Wow.
I don't know if that number's correct, but
but again, for a primary, it's not a huge amount. When you're talking about, this is a statewide race. This is a statewide race. And I'll look up in a minute. But what's your initial thought on, again, this is the guy that was on the fringe when he ran for governor. They were calling him Obama 2.0. Your thoughts?
Well, a couple of things. One, there is an abject failure on the Democratic side. So they're being, unseated the historical Democratic candidates because they have no policy. They've been running on anti-Trump for years. That's literally their policy. We just want to be against Trump. And so they're not giving a message to the voters that is appealing. So what does El-Sayed say? Free food, buses, free healthcare. He just totes the socialist line. And people, because again, they're ignorant and they're not educating themselves on what the DSA platform actually is, like abolishing the police and ICE and the military and the Department of War. And they just end up voting for him because he says, free buses. It's a failure of the Democratic Party. It's an ignorance on the part of the American people. And there's a laziness. People don't show up to the polls to bother to defeat these people. And meanwhile, the mosques in Michigan have been advertising how they rent buses. So we fight in our churches to get voter registration and ballot collection. And these guys are renting buses, transporting people to the polls. I have no doubt that they can get 15,000 Muslims based on how many mosques they have in Michigan to vote for this guy. If we don't start fighting for our republic, we are based on people, the vote of the people to elect our officials. If the American people don't want to respond and participate, this is what you get.
This is exactly what you get. This is the, some people call it the Mamdani effect, but really, this has been going on for much longer than even Mamdani.
Sure.
You were talking about, by the way, the out of the mosques, Dearborn Heights. Guys, I think I sent you that image. Dearborn Heights, Michigan scholar, this is according to memory, Hassan Ghazwini, said, please vote on Tuesday to deal the Zionists a big blow. Don't allow Zionists to hijack your vote. And we're seeing in some of these places, Hediye, that the Muslim turnout, like in Texas, we saw this when I was just recently down there. In some of these places, the Muslim voter turnout is like 60 to 75% versus the average turnout in a primary. If you're 30%, you're doing great, Right. So like you said, they're able to mobilize. They got their clerics and their mosques saying, this is your Islamic duty to vote. And
right.
Then what always people ask me is, I don't understand, Shahram, the Muslims who are pro-Sharia, like someone like Abdullah Syed, who, by the way, was endorsed by the leftist politicians like Elizabeth Warner and the Squad, but we're going to talk about Linda Sarsour, who is a known Muslim Brotherhood senior activist in America. Yes. But these guys are no longer fringe. That's what should be very telling of what's happening in our society, where when they were running on those DSA platforms, and people are not paying attention. As I said earlier, when you got even people like leftists like Bill Maher or Van Jones saying, hey, or Colville saying, hold on, time out. We don't even recognize this anymore. What is that telling you about the shift in the power structure here, where they feel now they have momentum, they have the ground game, they have power, or they have an ignorant population as well?
So it's all of those factors, but it was quite frankly genius on behalf of the Muslims, because when they were just running as Muslims, they were not winning. As soon as they've aligned themselves to this socialist campaign, they exploded. It was really a alliance of expediency and efficacy. Like it was working. It's across the country. So we have, Hamawi in New Jersey. We have that other girl in Colorado, the barista. I can't remember her name.
Yeah, Mirat Kilos.
Yeah, all of these candidates that are just kind of almost downplaying the Islam part, but upplaying the socialism part. And so the average voter who doesn't investigate these things, I mean, we're talking about the elites pointing it out. But when the average Americans don't understand the ideology of the democratic socialists, they're hearing these pleasantries about, we are for the people and we want to improve your life and we want to reduce costs of things and we want to give you free stuff. Everyone's like, wow, that doesn't sound so bad. Okay, so he's a Muslim. What do I care? Because for the most part, a lot of them are atheists too. So they don't care about religion. They figure, okay, so he prays. What do I care? And they're not paying attention to the fact that this is destructive to the foundation of American society and what we believe in as a country.
You make a great point. That was a great point about the fact that they weren't getting the traction when they were just running as Muslims. We know the Muslim Brotherhood started their own political party in 2015, the USCMO. So they have their own PACs. They have Mgage, Jet Blue, or whatever that Jetpack. Yet now they've aligned, and the alignment goes both ways because the Quiros gal in Colorado, I documented that she got almost $500,000 from Islamic groups. You know, so it went both ways. Whereas Abdul El Sayed was sort of the other way. Let's watch this clip, guys. If you have that clip, it's about 3 minutes. I want to get your comment as we're going to wrap up here soon. But this is his victory speech. Listen to what he says. He's got his Democrat socialist talking points down pat, but then of course he's got to throw in that he's a Muslim. Let's play this clip.
The historical numbers that we should have expected. And that tells you about the kind of movement that we were able to inspire. A movement that kicked off 15 months ago, traveling this state up and down, spending time in churches in Detroit and living rooms in Lansing, VFW halls in Escanaba, backyards in Grand Rapids, sometimes in rooms of 2 or 3, sometimes in rooms of 2,000 or 3,000. And across that movement that we built, there was an inspiration in the idea that we could take our government back. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people, instead of government of the corporations, by the special interests, and for the billionaires. And because you had the audacity to believe in that, you know that the billionaires, the corporations, and the special interests, they weren't going to give up lightly. We all knew they were going to spend their money. We didn't know they were going to spend $70 million of their money. We didn't know that they were going to outspend us $11 to $1. And yet we're still standing. So as folks ask, if and when we win this race, how are you going to beat Mike Rogers and their money? I want you to remind them that if we come through this, when we come through this, inshallah, that we'll have taken $70 million on the chin and kept fighting back. But I also want to speak to this moment. We've got 13 weeks to defeat Mike Rogers. And however we might feel about the campaign we've just come through, I want you to understand that it pales in comparison to the cynicism, in comparison to the corporatism, in comparison to the lies that Mike Rogers and Donald Trump are going to tell. There is so much more that unites us. However much we might disagree with our Democratic opponent, there is so much more that unites us than divides us. And so to all of our supporters here tonight, watching on TV, tomorrow we begin to mend fences. Whatever happens tonight, we have a responsibility to assure that we unite to make sure that Mike Rogers never sees the inside of the U.S. Senate.
So your thoughts? I mean, again, he threw in the inshallah. He threw in sort of, again, we're going up against corporatism, as if he didn't have millionaires, as if he didn't have, his millionaire donors from the Muslims. By the way, we know in this race, according to, let me get to this article. According to Fox News, El Sayed's campaign was backed by over $100,000 from 24 members of CARE. So we know that the Council of American Islamic Relations, 41 donors tied to CARE, gave $115,000 to his campaign. It is true that this was the most expensive Senate primary race in American history at over $80 million spent. So that's true. I mean, it's astronomical, the money that's being thrown around now. I remember when I ran for governor back in Washington State, we had a few $100,000 for our campaign. We're like, wow, that's great. Nowadays that's like chump change compared to that. But this is, again, folks, this is no longer fringe. This is now mainstream. And by the way, his Democrat opponent just came out and said, I'm fully behind Abdul al-Sayed. We're going to unite. We're going to mend the fences, blah, blah, blah. And they're going for that. What are your thoughts on that speech? And again, I think what you said was really right on with this is the connection that is now bringing them in. The DSA has the ground game. The DSA has the machine. Your thoughts?
Okay, he mentioned churches.
Yes.
And I just thought to myself, can we publicly shame whatever churches was hosting events for him? Because I don't understand what universe that happens. Based on just even on his platform. And again, it's just very Obama-esque. We're a big tent. We're going to mend fences.
Yes.
Just the idea that somebody who believes that strongly in Islamism and his brotherhood connections, they just don't realize what they're putting into place. It's ignorance and naivety on the part of the people who support him and don't realize what they've gotten themselves into. And as a country, again, we have to start the republic. We have to save the republic. And unfortunately, I have been watching a lot of what's happening on the woke right too, for lack of a better expression. But at the core of this is this anti-Semitism, this hatred of Israel and the Jewish people, which is aligning the DSA candidates and the Islamists as well, and then bringing in some of the independents and maybe even Republicans because of their hatred for Israel. And it's disgusting to me. I know Brandon talks about it all the time. It's abhorrent. And unfortunately, it's going to continue to tear apart at the fabric of this country.
It's such a great point. Such a great point that this is really happening on both sides of the aisle. We have, the outskirts of both sides of the aisle. In fact, both in Colorado and in this race in Michigan, the Democrats that were unseated as incumbents were both pro-Israel to some extent, especially in Colorado. Right. And yet Abdul al-Sayed, as you said, ran on the concept of we are definitely, genocide in Gaza. Israel is bad, bad, bad. And in fact, he's now come out and said just today, I saw that, hey, I want Jews to feel safe around me, basically. Like, I'm not against individual Jews, because, Dana Nessel, who is the attorney general in the state of Michigan, the first lesbian attorney general, she's Jewish. But yet these are, self-deprecating leftist Jews, just like we see in the Christian side. And this goes back to your point, Eddie, with the churches, when you mentioned churches, this goes back to what I said earlier in the program, which is, the interfaithers. Those are the people that work to shut us down. This goes back to the fact that there was a huge mosque in Dearborn that a bishop visited and talked about that. I covered it on my show like a couple weeks ago, where he talked about this is the most holy space I've ever been in, or most peaceful space I've ever been in. So you and I have talked about, again, interfaithism, multi-faithism, ecumenicalism. That's the deception that is completely making the church impotent. And or, as Brandon and I talked about yesterday or Tuesday, it is actually, they're complicit in inviting and bringing in that which is ultimately going to bring persecution to true Christians, to Jews, and to Christians who support Jews and the nation of Israel, the Jewish people. So great points there. Before I let you go, I know we don't have a lot of time, but just a couple of minutes. Sure. What's your thought on the latest with Iran? I know it's a big conversation, but man, do you think interview with Arakchi, the foreign minister, I think he's the foreign minister, said that when he was asked a question about U.S. troops coming and invading Iran, he said, we're ready for them.
It's interesting because, there's also reports that that the supposed giant attack that hasn't been orchestrated by the U.S. It was leaked.
Yes.
And so the idea that it was leaked on purpose to find the leaker I thought was super interesting. Because if that's the case, there's so much I can tell you from being part of the government, that there's so much that's happening behind the scenes that we don't know about. And bombing Iran into the Stone Age is a worrisome proposition. I know we're sitting here and we're kind of like, oh, like rip off the Band-Aid. Let's just be done with it. But I don't think even if we had a shock and awe campaign like we did in Iraq, it won't be done. It won't be finished. We won't be able to, because we will not, they're like cockroaches. These IRGC guys will just go underground and 5 of them will pop up and say, we're still alive. You know, so it's not going to end with just this massive bombing campaign. And so there's this constant, I mean, when I look at it as an outsider, I think Trump is balancing how much can we get in place with our Gulf partners to reroute around the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, how do we increase those alliances and create these alternative pathways? So we're balancing that, their relationship with Israel, and further economic prosperity between the Gulf and Israel, drawing them closer in a relationship. But also, at his heart, he's not a warmonger. He doesn't want to bomb people. It's like he's said that over and over. Despite the aggression towards Iran, he wants to solve this problem. We know there's no negotiating with the IRGC, but I'm just hoping somewhere in between here, the resistance will be armed. God willing, Reza Pahlavi's people, they'll have a constitutional referendum, that they'll be bombed, the IRGC, stronghold will be weakened to the point, along with the economic embargo, the sanctions, weakened to the point where there will be a people's revolution that could take over. But all of these things balancing together, it's not easy. It's a very complex problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And of course, the other piece of it is, you really wish that they would just unshackle Israel. They would just stop getting in the way of what Israel is capable of doing, what Israel has assets to do and intelligence to do inside the nation, they've been at it for a long time inside the country.
But here, let me give you another perspective about that.
Yeah.
If this was led by Israel, do you think in any circumstance that Israel and the UAE and Qatar could align for the Abraham Accord? Forget the fact that we have a problem with that title, but could we have gotten them to a place where they were even willing to talk if Israel was leading this campaign?
No, that's a great point. That from the aspect of if you're thinking that angle and that peace sort of path, then no, you're right, because then they would be seen as the aggressor. So, maybe this is Trump trying to give them cover, but
let us do it. Because when the U.S. does it, it represents strength, and it brings the Gulf closer to America because Iran's hitting the Gulf. But as soon as you put Israel in the front of it, everyone's like, oh, see, it's the Jews. It's Israel,
that's a good point. That's a good point. But like you said, there's no good answer in the sense of, the best answer that the Crown Prince has said again and again, which is that they need to have a unified message. I still wish that the U.S. would recognize the Crown Prince because the defections are the best route at arming the Iranian people. The defections are the best route at being able to actually have boots on the ground that are not U.S. boots on the ground or Israeli boots on the ground, even though we know that Israel has assets. And
Victor David Hansen suggested that the other day. He said that we should recognize a government in exile.
Exactly. Absolutely. And because ultimately this is what they did, right, with Khomeini. I mean, go back. This is the pattern they did. They recognized Khomeini in exile when they were turning on the Shah. They counted on the defections. That's, again, part of what my dad, I've said so many times, part of what my dad was witnessing was the fact that there were these people that were peeling off from loyalty to the Shah, which was concerning at that time. Today, we need to see it the other way around, right? But
remember, the difference is the Shah was a gentleman, and he didn't want to see his country ripped to shreds.
Yes, exactly.
The IRGC these people won't do that.
No. They're animals and they're demons. But but if you think about the individuals that are thinking of defecting, how would you stick your neck out if you were going to do that when you continue to get this mixed message of we're hitting it, we're negotiating, we're hitting it, we're negotiating? It's hard. And so, again, not an easy solution, a lot to do. But thank you for that analysis. I think that was really good analysis of the challenges that are there. This is not as easy as people thought it was going to be, or some people thought it was going to be. And yet we can continue to pray for the Iranian people, continue to pray for the underground church in Iran, and also continue to pray for our witness, because all of us are praying for that day that we can go back and be able to share the gospel.
And wisdom for our leaders, and wisdom for our president, for those that are making these decisions to be wise and to be just.
Amen. Amen to that. So, Hediye Miramati, resurrectministry.com. Hediye John, thank you so much for tonight, for your analysis and your insight, and appreciate it as always. Thank you for taking that time. And until next time, look forward to seeing you.
Thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure.
All right, we're going to go to break. And when we come back from the break, we have more on Brannon Howse Live.
You've heard about the new wave of GLP-1 weight loss shots, but you've also heard about the side effects, the nausea, the fatigue, the risks of injecting synthetic hormones into your body. What if there were a better way, a natural way? Meet Bellamelt, the indulgent, sugar-free caramel treat that's quietly changing the way women take charge of their weight. Unlike injections that flood your body with synthetic GLP-1, Bellamelt works with your body, using potent botanicals and essential nutrients to help you naturally increase your own GLP-1, the same hormone that controls hunger, cravings, and fat burning. Activated the way nature intended. Just a delicious caramel melt 30 minutes before your meal. In a 10-week clinical study of its key ingredient, African mango, participants lost an average of 28 pounds, reduced body fat by over 18%, and trimmed nearly 7 inches off their waist. Visit melissahousebg.com today. That's melissahousebg.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Individual results may...
Well, welcome back from the break. Brannon Howse Live. Again, Pastor Shahram Hadian filling in for Brannon tonight. It's so good to have you guys back with us. Our next guest is no stranger to this audience. This is a gentleman that I've respected for a long time. It's an honor to have him on again tonight. And he's, of course, we've been on with Brannon many, many times here. But I'm speaking of Robert Spencer of jihadwatch.org, the author of, I believe, his 32 books, incredible books that he has on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon. I think you can order it directly from their website as well. And so, Robert, thank you for being on with us tonight. How are you, sir, tonight?
Just great, Pastor. Thanks. Always good to see you.
It's so good to have you back. I so appreciate everything you've done. I've been a student of so much of your work for many, many years now. And so appreciate just your diligence to the truth, to scholarship. But I remember, you and I were talking before we went on air, I remember that about 10 years ago, when Brannon and I and Usama Dakdok and a few others had taken on James White and this interfaith mess that he had gotten himself into with, at that time, Sheikh Yasser Qadhi, who is now, of course, doing great damage in East Plano, Texas, and in the Dallas area. You had done a debate with James White, and I was smiling today because I was remembering that debate. And I mean, you embarrassed. I know that wasn't your intent, but you were asking such good questions because he was trying to claim that, Islam is not monolithic. There isn't one Islam, and you can't lump him in. And he was trying to defend James White. Do you remember, or Yasser Qadhi? Do you remember that? Or you remember your debate with him?
Oh, yeah, sure. It was a very short notice thing. And so I appreciate that you had a good impression of it. That's always good to hear. It's important to note that James White never did answer that there are indeed many versions, many variations, many sects of Islam. That is true. But I kept asking him, well, which one, can you name one that doesn't call for warfare against unbelievers? And that was the end. Then he started changing the subject.
Absolutely. Couldn't answer it. You kept asking him. You kept talking about the Sunni side, the Shia side. Couldn't answer it. And of course, earlier or last week when I was on with Brannon, we were talking about that. Where is James White now? Nowhere to be found, because I remember he said, when persecution comes, it's going to be Christians and Muslims that are going to be holding hands. Where is he now, as we see the greatest persecution of Christians in church history happening globally, predominantly at the hands of Muslims? He's kind of MIA, isn't he?
Yeah, come to think of it, I haven't seen or heard anything from him in quite a long time. Last I saw, he had a real good Salafi beard going.
Yes.
I don't know. Maybe he's converted. I don't know.
Maybe he's converted. Yeah, we said that these guys that come out defending Islam, they may go over to that side, like Tucker, where he starts talking so wonderfully about how wonderful Islam is and how he would love to go live in Doha. I'm like, hey, listen, we'll help you get there. We'll get a GoFundMe. We'll get you on a plane to Doha. Go ahead and do that. But Robert, let's get to, you mentioned to me that you have an article coming out tomorrow, I believe, at jihadwatch.org, where you're talking about this, again, tectonic shift that happened in the primary this week. We obviously saw it earlier this year with Mamdani, or I should say, I guess November of last year, but he was sworn in this year with Mamdani, with 40 plus Muslim candidates. Then we saw the latest round with the primaries in I think it was in May, with the likes of Chevalier and some of these people that are going to be going to Congress now that are either Muslim converts or part of this red and green access. Tell us about the article that's coming out and your warning to America about what just happened, also, especially in Michigan, with the primary election of Abdul El-Sayed.
Well, this was a video clip from the Middle East Media Research Institute, MEMRI, that dates from early June, but it didn't get any attention then. And it's got Abdul El-Sayed speaking to a Muslim audience. And he reminds them of a passage in the Quran, chapter 3, verse 110, which he then quotes and says, you are the best nation raised up for mankind, enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong. And I think the implications of this are extremely important, and virtually nobody is going to get it. So it's worth spending some time thinking about. In the first place, the Quran does say to Muslims, and at that point, you are the best nation, or the best of people, as another translation has it. And in chapter 98, verse 6, the same Quran says of unbelievers that they are the most vile of created beings. And chapter 8, verse 55 says they're like animals. So you've got this guy reminding Muslims that they're the best of peoples. I think it's very likely then that he thinks of unbelievers in exactly the same way that the Quran tells him to, as these animalistic subhumans. And even worse, the passage that he quotes goes on to say, enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong. Muslims are the best of people, according to the Quran, when they're telling the most vile of created beings what to do, when they're telling them what they think is right and wrong. Abdul El-Sayed is going to go to Washington and he's going to swear on that same Quran to uphold the laws of people he thinks are vile animals. It just doesn't make any sense. What he's really going to do, of course, is work to bring that best of people's idea of what is right and wrong to the land of the most vile of created beings. In other words, he's going to be working to bring Sharia to the United States. And he just essentially said that straight out by quoting this passage in this address that he made in June.
Wow. So that, again, that's going to be on jihadwatch.org tomorrow. And a must-read article. The attention, as you said, that it's not being brought to, we always say, just listen to what they're saying. Pay attention to what they're saying. Yes, there's deception involved, but at some point, they tip their hand to their supporters, don't they? They will let their own people know, hey, here's the plan, here's the agenda. And as you said, how can he defend the Constitution of the United States of America when they believe that it is the vile land and the worst of people? Because if it's, if we're supposed to be a Christian nation, Robert, what is it going to take? I mean, honestly, what is it going to take for people to wake up? Is it going to be the scenario of Western Europe, where as the wake up is happening, they're also finding themselves in a place where there's not much we can do about it because the government defends the Muslims, the globalist leftist governments of these nations are defending the Muslims, are continuing to expound on it's Islamophobia this and Islamophobia that. And also, what do you make of this connection now where it seems like the Muslims are running as the DSAers?
Yeah.
Where, what's your thought on that?
Well, they both hate the United States. They both hate Judeo-Christian civilization. They want to destroy it and replace it with their socialist authoritarian utopia. And the Muslims want to destroy it and replace it with their Sharia utopia. Both of them are authoritarians and internationalists. Both of them hate the U.S. So they are blood brothers and they work very well together. I think that the left is going to be in for a rude awakening if it does actually win, which God forbid. If it does destroy the United States, it's going to find that the Muslims are not as easy to control as they assume. It's just like when the Ayatollah Khomeini took over Iran, they thought the communists worked with him and they thought they were going to get a share in the government. And instead, all they got was prison and execution. And it's going to be the same. It plays out the same everywhere that the left and the jihadis have collaborated. It'll be the same here if it gets to that point.
That's such a great reminder of what's happened in the past and what we see repeating again. My cousin, by the way, Robert, was one of these fools who was part of that sort of communist Marxist movement. I had another cousin, female, who was part of the women's movement that was the communist group in Iran. And these people were then within 9 months or maybe a year of the overthrow of the Shah, were blacklisted, and my male cousin had to flee Iran through Turkey because they were going to come to arrest him and execute him. Because so isn't it amazing how these leftists? By the way, guys, do you guys still have? I had to send you a clip of in Florida. I don't know, Robert, if you saw this story. This was. Red Green Alliance. Here's the headline. Red Green Alliance stalks Florida. DSAer Angie Nixon. If you guys, there you go. Dons the hijab in pic with bestie Linda Sarsour. Now, we're well familiar with Linda Sarsour and her connections to the Muslim Brotherhood and so on. But look at this gal, which is the one in the pink, by the way, is the one who's running for office there. Donning a hijab. Is this the textbook definition of dhimmi?
Oh yeah. She doesn't realize it. This politician has no clue and thinks that she's just being generous and tolerant and multicultural and diverse and all that nonsense. She does not realize that women are brutalized and even killed for not wearing hijab, and that she is validating that by putting it on and acting as if it's completely normal and even something beautiful to celebrate. And she doesn't realize that her friends like Linda are going to be forcing American women into it if they get the chance. And this is, here again, it's the left Islamic axis. It always works out poorly for the left, but the left is in total denial and willful ignorance about that. I mean, Queers for Palestine is the quintessential example. They go to Gaza, they're going to get thrown off the tops of buildings, but they're out there agitating against Israel anyway. It's crazy.
Well, I was mentioning later that, or earlier in the program tonight, that even leftists like Bill Maher or some of these guys on the left, even they're sounding the alarm. Even they're like, wait a second, these DSAers are full-blown communists. But of course, they're working with the Muslims, the rabid anti-Semitism, the rabid Jew hatred, which has almost become a litmus test because some of these primary victories that they're getting are against Democrats that are pretty left, but yet they may support Israel. And man, if you support Israel, poof, you know, it's Armageddon against you by these DSers. But you're right. This is exactly what we've been saying again and again, is that the green will always prevail over the red, and they're using the red. But I think it is worth noting that it is because of this machine that this red has that these guys like Abdul al-Sayed, who by his own admission, guys, if you have that clip, let's just play maybe, can you actually go to like the middle of it and play the middle of it on, if that's possible for Robert?
And yet we're still standing. So as folks ask, if and when we win this race, how are you going to beat Mike Rogers and their money? I want you to remind them that if we come through this, when we come through this, inshallah, that will have taken $70 million on the chin and kept fighting back. But I also want to speak to this moment. We've got 13 weeks to defeat Mike Rogers. And however we might feel about the campaign we've just come through, I want you to understand that it pales in comparison to the cynicism, in comparison to the corporatism, in comparison to the lies that Mike Rogers and Donald Trump are going to tell. There is so much more that unites us. However much we might disagree with our Democratic opponent, there is so much more that unites us than divides us. And so to
let's go back here, if you can. That's enough of that. Robert throws in inshallah, gets a big, rouse from his crowd. And yet just, you have an article on Jihad Watch about Hassan Piker, the Maoist, sort of seems like he's now the spokesperson for the Democrat Socialists of America, who was on camera, on video, talking about that F the Islamophobes. So here you have them defending the Muslims. And then when these guys get power, by the way, what is Abdul, just so people understand, in case anybody out there is thinking, this guy's benign. Doesn't his father and he himself have deep connections to the Muslim Brotherhood in America and globally?
Yeah, absolutely. He's tied into the whole Muslim Brotherhood network in the United States. The Council on American Islamic Relations is the key organization for the Brotherhood in the U.S., but really every major Muslim organization in the United States is tied into the Brotherhood. And Abdul al-Sayed is deeply involved with CARE. So is his father-in-law. This is something that it should raise alarm bells for every American, because CARE is essentially Hamas in the United States. And according to a captured internal document of the Muslim Brotherhood, which names CARE and other Muslim groups as its allies, the Brotherhood is working in the United States at eliminating and destroying Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the believers. Now, that's a Quran quote, chapter 59, verse 2. Allah confuses the unbelievers so that they start to destroy their own houses while they're fighting the Muslims. And the Muslim Brotherhood is saying that's our strategy for the US. We're going to get them to destroy themselves. Now, what better way to do that than by electing a guy who is a Brotherhood operative, who is in sympathy with the worst enemies of the United States, to the United States Senate? And of course, he's not going to be the only one. There's going to be others in the Congress. I think there are going to be 6 representatives, and he'll be the one senator. And Nihal Awad of the Council on American Islamic Relations, who said he was happy about the October 7th massacre. he made a speech in 2024 saying, if we start to work hard, we could have 50 Muslim congressmen in 10 years. And who knows how many after that. And the thing is, this is not just like, oh, we'll have more Methodists or more Baptists or more Episcopalian congressmen. When you have Muslim congressmen, you have people who are working for Sharia. And that is a system of laws that is political, supremacist, expansionist, and violent, and completely contradicts constitutional freedoms in numerous ways.
Do you believe that's a great point there? And again, that should be the wake up, is people don't understand that, like you said, this isn't just a Muslim running, or this isn't just a candidate running, but these are people that vehemently, by their own words and by their connections, are seditious. Because, like you said, when you quote, by the way, I did not know that the Brotherhood's mission statement was based out. You're right. It just clicked in my mind that was based out of Chapter 59. That was brilliant. But they're telling you by their own words, we're here to overthrow you. and now the DSAers are also telling us, we don't want borders. We don't want boundaries. We don't want a president. We don't want a Senate. We don't want the judiciary. We want no prisons. We want no police. I mean, they're telling us that their agenda is the overthrow of this nation. I don't understand, Robert. I don't understand. You mentioned Iran earlier. You know, this is the mistake. So many Iranians today, younger people especially, are asking their parents, what was wrong with you? Why didn't you recognize this and wake up and do something? And now look at 47 years later. And you mentioned hijabs earlier. You got Iranian women over the last 3 years who have been imprisoned, beaten, raped, and murdered for tearing their hijabs off and burning them in the streets. And every February 1st, we got Wear a Hijab Day in America, thanks to the Muslim Brotherhood and ICNA and their groups. This is suicide. Like, are we committing national suicide? And I don't know what the solution is, other than, the Lord acting. I don't know what it's going to take to wake people up to this threat.
Yeah, well, I think that unfortunately we're going to look at a situation where the United States is going to be increasingly like India. And in India, there are a lot of people who have woken up to the threat, but there are still a lot of people in the media establishment and the political establishment who say all the same things that they say in the United States. You know, it's a religion of peace, tiny minority of extremists, racism, bigotry, Islamophobia, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, whenever there's a jihad terror attack. There's a growing number of Muslims. They're increasingly aggressive and assertive. There are jihad attacks on a frequent basis. And also, and this is very much worth noting for Christians, there are frequent attacks on Hindu religious activities. And Hindus in their own country, where they form a great majority, they still have to worry going down the street in a religious procession, not hurting anybody, and Muslims are liable to attack them. This is what we're looking at in the future of the United States. Christians are going to be in their churches. They're going to be increasingly attacked. There will be more jihad, and it will be completely explained away the way it is now, and the victims blamed as Islamophobes. There's just going to be more and more of it until there is, you reach, and I think we are going to reach that at some point, the core bedrock group of Americans who want their freedom, who understand that freedom must be fought for, and are not going to take Sharia and Islamization. But I do not see increasingly every day how we can avoid a conflict. I am not calling for it. I'm not justifying it. I am not excusing it. But I'm saying the more that the political establishment sells us out and threatens our freedoms, the more they make that conflict inevitable.
Absolutely. And obviously the biggest difference between us here and nations like Canada, Western Europe, New Zealand, Australia, or so forth, is that they've been disarmed. We haven't.
Exactly.
So that conflict that I agree with you 100% is coming, because it's one of two things. Either there's going to be a conflict or there's going to be a national divorce, because I don't know how you navigate out of this, given where some of these states are going, given that New York is now conquered, Dearborn Heights, Hamtramck, Michigan is conquered. You have Minneapolis conquered, other cities around Minneapolis. And of course, you have now them targeting Florida and Texas and other places. And speaking of Texas, by the way, there was some video, I think it was yesterday before, from the city of McKinney near Dallas that, because they're, another 5,000 or a 5-acre, huge monstrosity of a mosque, all the money flooding in. Do you believe, and I saw some of the people out there bravely actually tackling the subject of Islam is not a religion. Islam is a governmental, political, civil, legal system that is totalitarian. Do you see in your sphere, with your audiences or whoever you're talking to, do you see that is at least shifting and moving where I've said to people, I think long term, if we don't change this narrative and begin to label Islam as we would communism or Marxism or socialism or globalism and say, hey, that's a form of government that's antithetical to our government, it just doesn't work. It's not going to work. We can't coexist. But they hide behind this religious label. Do you see that as a possibility now that the language is changing, that some people are beginning to wake up and say, we got to stop calling Islam a religion? No thanks to people like James White, by the way.
Well, okay, first thing I got to say is, unfortunately, I'm totally in sympathy with these movements, but I do think Islam is a religion. I don't think it's a good religion or a true religion,
right.
But a religion is just something that claims to relate people to the divine, and Islam does that. So
right.
I think that it's a good strategy to say Islam's not a religion, but we have to insist the other part of it that these people are doing, that Islam is political. And it's not just political, but it's supremacist, and it will subjugate us and deny us rights. And that's what we have to keep harping on and keep repeating. I've been repeating it for decades now, and we've got to keep at it and continue. And I do think it's becoming more obvious. There's now a Sharia-free caucus in the House of Representatives that's based on that idea. More and more Americans are waking up to it. So yes, they are making great gains, but so are we.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's a good positive point, is that I have seen that wake up also. The last couple of years, something definitely has shifted. And because it was like, I mean, you remember like 4 or 5 years ago, you could even say the word Sharia. It was a career killer, especially as an elected official. Now, with, as you said, I think it's up to 68, if I remember right, or almost 70 members of Congress now are part of the Sharia-free caucus. You see some state legislators standing up, some governors, obviously, with what Texas, at least on paper, did, and then Florida went one better with the labeling of the Muslim Brotherhood. By the way, I don't know if you saw that Florida's bill that they signed, DeSantis signed in July. They went back and they stiffened their penalties on the application of foreign law or religious law in the court systems. Remember ALAC, American Laws for American Courts.
Oh yeah.
But they actually said Sharia in the bill. It's actually in the bill. Whereas, of course, with American Laws for American Courts, we were told the only way that's going to pass, you don't mention Sharia. We got to say foreign law. So that is a positive, but that's a great point that Islam, yes, there's a religious component. There is a religious, but yet the political, the civil, the criminal. And this is, I think, where they use this term Islamist, but really we know it is all Islam.
Yeah,
right?
The whole idea of Islamism was invented in order to distance Islam from the crimes done in its name and in accord with its teachings. And really got to say that I just don't have respect for people who assume that there is a real distinction within Islam between what they think of as Islamism, which is all the bad parts, and some beautiful religion at the core. Right. They just have, if they really believe that, they have not done their homework. They're either uninformed or intentionally deceptive.
Yeah, great point. Exactly. I agree with you 100%. Well, again, this goes back to how we started tonight, and that is, you go back to these churches. You go back to how many of these denominations and churches in America whether mainline, evangelical, Catholic, are promoting ecumenicalism, are promoting interfaithism and multi-faithism. So when you have that as a narrative where, look, we have the spiritual common ground, as a former Muslim, I go up and tell people there's actually nothing in common, because one is the spirit of Christ, the Bible, one is the spirit of Antichrist. Oh, you can't say that. That's too offensive. Well, I'm just telling you what the Bible has defined as the Antichrist spirit. He who denies Jesus is the Christ. He who denies the Son of the Father. He who denies Christ has come in the flesh. This is the spirit of Antichrist. 1 John 2, 1 John 4, 2 John 7 through 11. So this is the same argument we made, by the way, with James White 10 years ago, and he never answered it. Because my simple question was to him, biblically, is Islam an Antichrist spirit? Biblically. Because of what it denies. He never would answer the question, Robert. Not one time did he ever was willing to answer the question. Just like he never answered your question about the schools of Islam, and give me one that doesn't teach jihad as warfare against unbelievers. We got a couple of minutes left. What would be the message right now, first of all, to elected officials? If people can go before their elected officials, what should they be communicating to put them on notice with what is happening now, even politically, with these victories? Obviously, Abdul El-Sayed, it'll probably be a tight race in the general election with Mike Rogers. But, very likely, would you agree? He could be, like you said, the first Muslim U.S. senator in history.
Oh, yeah. I hope I'm wrong. I do think he's going to win the election.
Yeah.
I don't think Mike... I don't actually know anything about Mike Rogers, and I mean no offense to the man, but I know that American politicians in general, they just won't go near this issue. And so Abdul El-Sayed is going to be talking about how much he's going to do for the common people and how much he's going to take care of everything and, free stuff like Mamdani. And nobody seems to understand how important it is to keep emphasizing, well, who's going to pay for this? Where's all this money going to come from? It doesn't just come out of nothing. And especially to challenge the Islam part, he's not going to go there. And meanwhile, all the Muslims in Michigan, and it's a considerable number, are going to vote 100% for Abdul El-Sayed. It's going to be very tough for Mike Rogers to overcome that. He does not have any 100% voting bloc on his side.
Yeah, isn't that crazy, though? Isn't that crazy what you just said? That we're seeing them 75% to 100% voter turnout, where if we break 30%, we're like, woohoo, we're doing 30% voter turnout. And it is unbelievable. All these churches
for the person they're told to vote for, because it's exactly this ideology.
Right, exactly. And that's the other part. Again, and that exactly fits into the narrative of this is a political system. Yes. They don't have a problem from the pulpits on Fridays being able to say, vote for so-and-so. We're going to, whether it's the DSA or they're voting for, who, because again, to me, the other deeply concerning thing about what's happening on the left and then also on the, quote, alt-right is this anti-Jew, anti-Zionism, anti-Semitic movement that is incredibly concerning with how just flippant they are now. It's just become the norm. But that's a great point that people like Mike Rogers and the Republican Party, and even Trump, he came out and bashed Abdul El-Sayed, but didn't say anything about the fact that he was a Muslim. Right. That he was Muslim Brotherhood, socialist, communist, Marxist, but they won't go there. That's a great point. But we will go there. You have gone there, and we will continue to warn this nation and Christians. And so I'm so grateful, Robert, for your years of work, your dedication, your courage, and your latest work. And of course, I'm constantly using stuff that you put on Jihad Watch. But again, any closing comments for people to hopefully encourage them? And I guess one more question. What do you see happening in November?
Oh, I think there's going to be big gains unfortunately, for the DSA, for the Muslims. And we have not yet seen this movement reach its apex. But at the same time, people are waking up. people understand that these Sharia communities like Epic City in Texas, they're not just religious communities, but they are communities that want to impose Sharia, and they're going to come in conflict with the non-Muslims in the area where they're situated. People are waking up, and so I hope that will continue. And while I breathe, I hope it ain't over till it's over, as the great philosopher Yogi Berra said.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And we continue to hold hope that only our actions, our prayers, and a sovereign God can spare America. But I agree with you 100%. I think we're heading towards conflict. And I think if they get power, we're heading towards mass arrests. And Brandon and I have talked about this many times, that people like us will be the first on the line to be rounded up or to be banned. But meanwhile, let's use our voices, let's use these platforms, and let's continue to warn. So thank you for all that you do. Thank you so much for being on with me today. It's an honor and privilege to be on with you again.
The honor's all mine. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, folks, we're going to go to a break. And when we come back from the break, we got Gordon Chang, more talking about this subject tonight. Stay tuned.
Friends, this is Brandon Howes. For more than a year now, I've been teaching through the book of Revelation, and the response from you has been overwhelming. You've asked me again and again, when are you going to put this study in print? We want to mark it up. We want to share it with our families. Well, it's here. My brand new 2-volume commentary on the book of Revelation, verse by verse, chapter by chapter. This is not a watered down, allegorized replacement theology approach to Revelation. This is a literal, grammatical, historical study, the way the Lord intended his word to be read. And I connect the prophecy of Revelation to the headlines you're watching unfold right now, the rise of global government and the convergence of end-time events the Lord Jesus warned us about. Folks, we are living in serious days, and there has never been a more important time to understand what God has told us about what is coming. Get your 2-volume Revelation commentary today at worldviewstore.com. That's worldviewstore.com.
Well, thank you again for joining us on Brandon House Live, back from the break here. And again, folks, tonight we've been talking about this red-green access. We've been talking about what has been going on in America with these elections. We talked about a lot about Abdul El-Sayed, but we talked a lot about the Democrat Socialists of America taking over the Democrat Party. And we also talked a lot about how we see silence from our churches in many, many cases. Yet these folks that are running as Muslims or DSAers, they have no problem rounding up the mosques. They have no problem rounding up their leftist progressive churches. But we see this silence from the true Christians in this nation, the people that should have discernment and wisdom. And again, you guys know my backstory, coming from Iran, witnessing this red-green axis in Iran. We lived it. My dad, again, in the military under the Shah of Iran, he saw this infiltration. He saw it happening in the universities, in the media, in the military. He tried to warn people. He got out early, got us out of Iran just a few weeks before the government fell, because of the fact that we saw this red-green infiltration in Iran. Here it is in America. So I'm going to go to my next guest, Gordon Chang. Gordon's been on, of course, many times with Brandon, my first time interviewing him. But Gordon is an expert on all things China, on communism. Gordon, thank you for being on with me tonight. I'm so grateful that you took the time to be with me. How are you doing?
I'm fine, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you, Shahram. So thank you.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. So, Gordon, what do you make of this? I really wanted to pick your brain about, for people to understand that this Democrat Socialists of America, we've seen a lot of ways that the Chinese Communist Party has been funding. Remember a few years ago with Black Lives Matter, right? You were one of the people that exposed the connection of an entity like Black Lives Matter to the Chinese Communist Party. Is DSA, is this a fad? Is this just, should we dismiss these people? Or is this a legitimate infiltration that is not only funded here, but funded from outside the country. What's your take on all this?
Yeah. The Chinese Communist Party is part of this red-green axis that you talked about. And clearly, we are seeing China funding disruptive elements in our society. So, for instance, we always talk about Neville Roy Singham. Now, Singham is an American citizen. He has First Amendment rights, but he is resident in Shanghai, and he coordinates his activities with the Communist Party's United Front Work Department, which is the part of the party that subverts foreign governments. So Singham has not been filing under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which he's required to do because he's become an agent of the CCP. But we also know that Singham has funded a lot of money into the United States and other societies around the world. So, for instance, between 2017 and last year, Singham dumped $591 million into various organizations. He did this surreptitiously, which is an indication of criminal intent. We know that he's got a group of about 67 core organizations, but the wider network that he funds is about 2,000. People have said that about 278 million of that is actually directed into the United States, but I think probably a lot more of that is because his wife, for instance, is Jody Evans, co-founder of Code Pink. Code Pink gets Singham money, and we know that Code Pink propagates CCP narratives. One other thing, under the filings for the Foreign Agents Registration Act, FARA, last year, filings showed that China put in $100 million into its agents in the U.S. And that's just the money that was reported. I'm sure that there's a lot more money that is unreported. So we can see the extent of China's funding of leftism in our country.
Wow, that's unbelievable that there is that level, Gordon, of open. I mean, this is the open financial stuff that you're able to see and find. Is this now funding? Do you think that? I mean, obviously, some of these characters that are part of this political movement seem over the top. You know, you got this guy Hassan Piker that is now sort of has become the face of the Democrat Socialists of America, wearing a Chairman Mao suit recently. But do you think that, again, what, you know, the machine, you know, forget the sort of the clownish, you know, front face of this. There's a machine behind this, right? I mean, this is a well orchestrated machine that, of course, is working with the Muslims on the green side of this for the overthrow of our government. Why isn't this front and center? Why isn't this a national security issue? I mean, shouldn't we be talking about this as in this is a national security issue, that it's an infiltration, that this isn't just politics as normal? They're calling for the overthrow of our government. I don't get this.
Yeah, and obviously it should be a national security interest. We know, for instance, that China has put a lot of money into American elections and a lot of effort. So you go back to 2020. We know that they supported Joe Biden over Bernie Sanders in the Democratic Party primaries. And then, of course, they supported Biden over Trump in the general election. Beijing worked very hard. First of all, it got money into the U.S. through Act Blue, which is the Democratic Party's website. They did this in small contributions from foreign sources, which is obviously illegal, but it's very, very hard to trace. And we also know that China used its social media bots and text messages to disrupt the Trump campaign. So it was clear. In 2024, we saw that the Chinese devoted most of their efforts not to the presidential campaign, but to state and local races. And we don't know what they're going to do in the midterms and, of course, in 2028. But they're going to be influential one way or another. And so we've got to get this out of our society. We can do it. This is our country, but we're going to have to take extraordinary measures. But this is an extraordinary threat, and these are extraordinary times.
Are these people that are running, obviously the Muslims like Abdul al-Sayed, I mean, you know, and I've been watching clips since Tuesday, since the primary election in Michigan, and most people are harping on the fact that they are claiming he's a Marxist, but they don't really emphasize much about the Islamic side of this. But these DSAers, I mean, when they say they're communist, are they communist? I mean, they're running under a socialist platform, but are they actually meaning that their stated goals for what they would want to see happen in America, do you believe that's true communism in what they're pushing?
When you look at their platform, it certainly looks communist. Now, I'm not saying everybody in the DSA is a communist, but their platform certainly is. And I'm sure that many of them are, because they were able to make that put that platform together. When you look at socialism, the problem with socialism is that it goes against life, as Havel told us, which means that they have to use force to get their to enforce their dictates. And that means they eventually do become communists. And we have seen this transformation from socialism to communism in a number of societies. So we cannot ignore what's occurred elsewhere.
Is this what we're seeing right now in New York? Mamdani's that gal, what is her name? I'm blanking on her gal, Sia something, whatever her, who is part of his housing. They're coming out and saying, look, private property ownership is on the table. We got to recognize. I mean, isn't that true communism? Or I guess maybe is it? Brandon always talks about kind of communitarianism, but like when people ask me, like, well, how does this affect our lives? I mean, isn't that one of the ways that it's going to affect our lives? When you said by the force of government, when they're actually coming out and saying, well, there is no such thing as private property rights. Your home isn't really your home. If we need it, we're going to, I don't know, do they use eminent domain? What do they use to be able to do that? But I mean, is that what you're talking about, where you have that very thin line between socialism and then it comes into full communism?
Very simply, government ownership of property, the abolition of private property, that's a part of communism. That's a core part of communism. So yes, I think that we can say that those who advocate that, or advocate the government takeover of business, which Mamdani is talking about with grocery stores, these are the thin edges of wedges of communism.
Do you see the will? What was it? 1954? Was that the Communist Act when the hearings were there? I mean, obviously I wasn't born then, but do we see the will? Do you see the will, Gordon, to actually recognize this as an existential threat? That again, this is not politics as usual. That there is no coexisting with this red-green axis, both on the Islamic side, but also on this Marxist communist side. Because I mean, if they get their way, where they claim no prisons, no borders, no police. They want to obviously completely do away with a very form of government, but yet won't they start jailing people like you and I if they have power?
Certainly.
Isn't that what they'll do?
We've seen this in other societies as they progressed from free market capitalist ones to communism. So yes, this has been the pattern. And we can't ignore it. Now, unfortunately, you have political parties. They are there to take power. And what we're seeing in the Democratic Party right now, and I'm not singling it out because, I mean, we've seen this behavior in the Republicans as well with regard to different groups. But we're seeing them say, yeah, we want to get elected. We need power. And they're putting their energy behind candidates that have red views, that are part of this red-green axis. So yeah, we don't have the political will right now as a society. Some people do, but not enough. And I can't say as a society that we are determined to protect ourselves from the red-green axis. Just look at what's happening on the streets of Dearborn. This really looks like Baghdad or Damascus. It does not look like the United States.
Yeah, great point. Great point there. And earlier in the show, I played a clip of this guy Jake Lang getting pummeled in Dearborn just a few days ago because he was out there on the streets lifting up a sign for Jesus Christ. And I mean he's kind of an agitator, but yet I mean. Police did nothing to protect him because they're taking over the police departments. They're obviously taking over city council. And I think it was really interesting what you said, which is that you're seeing the CCP has shifted, at least in the 2024 race, you said they shifted from federal to local, which we've been arguing this all along, that we don't pay enough attention to the local politics, the local races, with my travels too, what I've seen a lot is that their infiltration is local, where they're able to really influence these city councils, county commissions. So that's really fascinating that's the shift you're seeing. Do you see this going to, I asked my last guest, do you see this going to an armed conflict because of where this is going? I mean, how do we coexist with this?
You can't coexist with people who are intolerant. It's as simple as that. And it's not like we're going to use force against them.
Right.
I mean,
right.
But they will use force against us. And there are hints that they are accumulating weaponry. So we have to be prepared for an armed struggle and an insurrection.
Let's shift focus in the last few minutes that we have, because I wanted to get your take from America just for a minute, obviously, because again, there's a lot we can talk about with what's happening here. And again, I don't know, maybe part of me is just astonished how this has become mainstream. I mean, some of these people were so fringe. It's amazing that when someone like AOC becomes mainstream, a few years ago, she was the fringe left. Bernie Sanders was a fringe left. Now they're sane compared to some of these people. But just for the sake of time, I wanted to shift to the conflict with Iran. We know that there have been elements of Chinese enabling support for this Iranian regime, whether technologically, whether potentially intel. What do you see as the latest there? Because I think everybody's concern is that if this accelerates, and goes beyond just U.S., Iran, Israel, Iran, that it could involve China. I mean, is that where we're heading in that sense? But have you got any information as far as maybe where the Chinese are sort of drawing the line as far as supporting this regime in Iran?
China is doing basically everything to support the Iranian regime. And during the course of the war, it's provided across-the-board support, everything except for combat personnel. Last week, we learned from the Reuters reporting that a Chinese company, through a Hong Kong intermediary, was planning to ship up to 400 shoulder-launched missiles, man-pads, man-portable missiles. This is important because a man-pad on April 3 brought down a U.S. Air Force F-15E, and it's believed that the Iranians used a Chinese man-pad to do that. Now, the response out of the administration has been, well, whatever the Chinese have done have not affected the trajectory of the war. No, that's not the correct response. The correct response is that China, if it sells weapons to Iran, we will impose the most severe costs on Beijing because we will not allow the Chinese to continue to kill Americans. And they've done that already in this war. China has allowed Iran to use one of its satellites to provide precise targeting data, and it is almost inevitably 100% almost that satellite, the T-01B of China's Earth Eye company, was used to kill 6 Americans on March 1st in Kuwait. So clearly this has been something which has been unacceptable from the beginning. The administration has not clamped down on China, and it's absolutely got to do it because we see the Chinese becoming more and more bold.
And of course, there was a lot of speculation. I don't know if you have any information about this, but we know that from June of 2025, when Israel had started the 12-day war, well, it ended up being 12-day war, and until this year, that there was some talk about that the Chinese had given the Iranians the technology to block the satellites because remember when early in this year when Elon Musk had opened up Starlink, for the Iranians to try to, for the people to try to get information out, but then that was being jammed. And what I had read was that was potentially Chinese technology. Have you confirmed that, or?
It's 99% sure. I mean, we don't know 100% because
Okay.
we're not inside the Iranian regime, but the Iranians didn't have that technology, and there's only a couple of places they could have got it, either Beijing or Moscow. Almost certainly China, because China's technology is advanced and more advanced than Russia's in this regard.
Wow. And of course, as a result of that blackout, even according to the White House, 52,000 Iranians were massacred. Last question, Gordon, because of time for you. I want to respect your time. And I wanted to pick your brain. I've had a lot of people say to me, particularly people that, as Christians, we try to pray and try to discern what's going on, that something changed in President Trump after his China visit, after he visited with Xi Jinping and China. What's your take? And I apologize if you've already answered that with Brandon before, but this is bugging me because some people have said something was different after he came back from that trip.
I'm not sure that it was different after he came back the trip, but it's certainly different from when he took office for the second time, because Trump did change his views in this second term. So I'm not sure that it was after the May summit, but clearly Trump has a China policy which is not appropriate at this time. We need something much more resolute, something much more vigorous, because we see China in ways infiltrating our society. And Trump has done some good things, but not good enough.
And that's huge when you're talking about that potentially this is one of the most, the evidence that came out, as you said, with the election interference in 2020, for sure, that even the president mentioned had happened, which was buried by the intelligence. But you're talking about that they're continuing to fund huge. I mean, you're talking about big dollars when you're talking about, potentially in the billions of dollars of their disruption to influence elections and to support people that are calling for our overthrow. You're right, Gordon. If we don't change, he doesn't sound as tough. He doesn't sound as resolute as he was, recognizing that. And it seems like, I don't know, it seems like he's more pragmatic, doesn't it? It seems like it's more pragmatism. I want to make deals. I want to have peace. But your final thoughts on that?
Yeah. When a reporter in the Oval Office confronted Trump about the Reuters report about the man pads, we didn't get a China has to stop this. We got a sort of, well, I'd be disappointed, and these things happen during the course of wars. Well, they happen during course of wars if we don't protect our servicemen and women.
Right.
And this is something that Trump has the power to do. He's sent our servicemen and women into harm's way. He has a moral obligation to do everything possible to make sure that China is not providing the means to Iran to kill them. Simple as that.
Simple as that. Well said. That's exactly what, there should be that sort of resolution. And just like he should have that resolution with the fact that the regime has now executed somewhere close to 60 people since the claim that Trump had made that we've stopped the executions. There's no more executions. They're not being as resolute with that. But really what's very alarming is what's happening here. And I do pray that enough people wake up to this. But thank you so much, Gordon, for your expertise. It was a pleasure and honor to have you on tonight. And it's Gordon G. Chang, right? They can find you on X, follow you on X.
Yes. And thank you so much for mentioning that.
Yeah, absolutely. And please, folks, follow Gordon on X. And what a terrific insight tonight. Thank you, Gordon. That was terrific insight, terrific information about, again, this red-green axis. They're working together. We see China working with these Islamic countries. We see it here in the United States. And we better wake up, man. We better wake up. It's just crazy. But thank you again so much for being on with me tonight. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Shahram. I really appreciate it.
Have a great night. All right, folks, thank you so much for being with us tonight here on Brannon House Live. Again, Brannon will be back soon, but he was taking his wife out for her birthday, and so it was a privilege and honor to get the cover for him tonight. And of course, as always, I'm on with Brannon, regularly as he asks. But it's great to fill in for him and give him a much needed break. So again, thank you guys all for being with us. Brannon House Live. I am Pastor Shahram Hadian with Truth and Love Ministry, and we'll see you next time on the program. Have a great night.
Welcome to Technocracy News with your host, Patrick Wood. I'm your co-host, Logan House. Today we have Pentagon plans AI data centers at military bases. Clarity Act, will it pass or not? And then we have a two-part series from you, Patrick. Just in the last week, part one, technocrats called for dictatorship and technocracy in 1932. Part one and two. But part two is technocrats called for dictatorship and technocracy in 2026. So we're seeing some parallels there from 1932 to 2026. But let's start out with this one. Pentagon plans AI data centers at military base. Technocrats have pried open federal land for AI data center construction. You might have missed Trump's executive order 14318, accelerating federal permitting of data center infrastructure on July 23rd, 2025. Alongside the release of the Winning the Race America's AI Action Plan. Waiting to pounce with billions of dollars were large investment companies like BlackRock, KKR, Blackstone, and Carlyle. So far, it's a feeding frenzy. Trump signed 220 executive orders during his first term. He's far ahead of that pace with 270 signed in the first 19 months of this term. Wow, so he's already passed his first administration in executive orders with only about half his term served.
I haven't checked, but I think it's a record for sure for any president.
Mm-hmm.
I remember President Clinton first started the presidential actions to use executive orders. They called it ruling with a pen and a phone, I think it was. That was a doctrine or a policy that was set by, can't remember exactly who it was at this point. Shoot, it skips my mind. But this was a formal statement that somebody made that back in the 90s that, the president can rule with a pen and a phone. And this is exactly what we see. Does Trump really need 270 EOs in the first 19 months? He's headed towards 500 at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot. No wonder that we can't keep up with all these signings.
Yeah, exactly. There's too many to keep up with. So what is this about these data centers being built on military bases? Whose data centers are they going to be? Are they going to be the federal government's data centers, or are they partnering with tech companies to build these?
It seems it's going to be private-public partnership.
Mm-hmm.
So the military will get compute. The data centers will be leased out, maybe elsewhere as well. Apparently at this point, these are not the data centers that are being built by Meta or Google or OpenAI. These are going to be built by the investment companies to lease out to these companies.